Unshelling Medicine Podcast. Healthcare in the language we understand.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to this great episode. Oh my goodness, we have a lot to celebrate. I have my now friend, Joelle Kaufman here, and we have incredible news to share. The last time she was on, we talked about her book, Crushing the Cancer Curveball, because she had this incredible journey that she shared with us of her experience with cancer. And Joelle's book was released like 24 hours ago. In 24 hours, please share with us what happened.
In 24 hours, it became a #1 international bestseller.
Pew, pew, pew! Congratulations!
Thank you.
Oh,
I'm really glad that it speaks to people. That's what it's for, right?
So, backstory a little bit. Joelle here had me look at some of the reviews, and this is why it is very important that you're intentional in what you do in helping others, because this is the kind of reward you get. People that resonate with your story, people that are touched with your story, and when your story is authentically told by you in a way that supports others, this is what happens. So well-deserved, Joelle, well-deserved. I'm so happy for you.
Well, I'm very excited. And one of the wonderful things is that the number of healthcare providers that have downloaded it, that are reading it, I can even tell a story. About 3 weeks ago, one of my friends reached out, said, I can't believe we're going to have this in common, but my wife was just diagnosed. She's going to have the same procedure you had. Would you talk to her? And by the way, my wife's an ER doc. I said, well, I'm happy to talk to her. She's a doctor. And we ended up on the phone, she and I, and she had a bunch of questions that they're in the book, but she just had questions about what this would be like for her as a person, for her body, for her sexuality, her recovery. So we had a really great conversation. And she had her procedure. Everything's gone well. It's great. He got a text from someone during the release day, said, hey, this book was referred to me by someone I know. I don't know any of these people. And while it sounds like a book you might want to write someday, maybe it would help you. And my friend wrote back, already own it, have spoken to her. It's awesome. So I'm like, the universe is helping it get to people.
Yes.
And the healthcare providers, this was a doctor. And even she said, there's a perspective. And the doctors who endorsed it, there's a perspective about what's the whole experience like.
Right.
And, I want to change the story. And because I want to change the story, and because my experience was one of hope and strength and optimism, I want people to hear this horrible news, feel whatever they're going to feel, and then latch on to something like my book for hope, for optimism, and for strength.
Beautiful, beautiful. Please just hold up that beautiful book again. So everybody, Crushing the Cancer Curveball. It is on Amazon. So if you're a Kindle person, download it. If you're, traditional thumbing through the page person like me, grab a copy. It is worth a read. Nobody plans for cancer diagnosis. Nobody plans to be devastated by a treatment. However, finding those moments where alternatives lie, and also to be very purposeful in your healing journey, is very helpful. So please, please, please grab your copy. So I had her show that book again, because as we get into this conversation, it's going to keep coming up. It's a beautiful, those of you that are listening, beautiful text, beautiful pictures on the back, and it's gorgeous. So, and even the message inside is even better. So, let's talk about these journeys, because as a doctor, I guess people have an expectation that you're in the healthcare industry, you should know, right? But she's an ER doctor. And as an ER doctor, they're the fixers, they fix and send off, right? So going through a journey, especially a treatment journey, is not common with that career. What out of that conversation surprised you the most?
One of the things that was surprising was, she shared that she met with the oncologist, and she's at a very premier world-class hospital, so she had access to great people. And the oncologist said something along the lines of, you've got run-of-the-mill breast cancer. You don't need to have a big, nasty surgery. And I'm sure that clinically, that is correct.
Mm-hmm.
And so my friend, or my friend's wife, I guess she's now my friend, she said, it didn't make me feel good. Now, I appreciate why doctors have to retain a clinical distance, right? Sometimes they have to say the worst thing, right? But, this doctor was hearing it and saying, but you're questioning my decision. You're not supporting my decision. And that makes me doubt my decision. So what I said to her was, we all have our own personal risk profile. Your doctor was telling you that statistically, you have some different choices given the risk.
Right.
What she wasn't hearing, what her doctor wasn't hearing, was the risk profile I choose is, I don't want to hear breast cancer again. Yeah. I want to do what will give me the highest probability, not of living, but of never hearing breast cancer again. Because both choices she had lead to living.
Right.
Right? She wanted this episode to be done. And I gave her assurance that is a 100% valid choice.
Right.
That the process she was using to assess her alternatives and her risk was 100% valid. And I think it's important as a patient, you may have self-doubt, right? Even if you are a highly trained medical professional. And doubt is normal. And then making peace with, I'm making my choice based on the full context of my life, right? A woman in the book who had the same diagnosis as me, her tumor actually got bigger than mine. She was stage 3. She was young, 38. And the protocol for her, she didn't have any genetic, was a lumpectomy with radiation. So that's what she chose. She knew she could have a bilateral mastectomy. That's not her choice. Also, 100% valid.
Right.
And her reasons were different. And I think it would help medical professionals to learn how to ask the question.
Yeah.
Instead of saying, you've run-of-the-mill breast cancer, why are you doing that? And that's a very judgy way of trying to say, like, the data says you don't need it. Let's say, okay, I'm curious what your thinking was. Yeah. And if you have any questions I can answer to ensure you're making an informed choice. And if I don't have questions, like a question might be like, what's the risk of recurrence with this versus that? And, what are the risk of complications? In this case, the ER doc knew that the placement of the tumor was near her heart. Right. And she had more sensitivity to risk of a cardiac damage from the radiation. So she wanted to avoid radiation. Well, okay, that's her unique body and knowledge and placement. And if her doctor knew that's what she was optimizing for, she could say, okay, that sounds great. Or let me show you what the radiation oncologist can do to protect your heart. That's all.
Yeah. So I have a 2-part mindset to everything that you said. So I'm glad it happened to a doctor. I'm glad it happened to a doctor, or I'm glad it happened to a healthcare professional, because sometimes it takes for us to be immersed in the patient experience to understand the empathy we need to apply in our own practices, right? And that experience may actually affect change in her organization, in her emergency room, right? In the way that patient experience and listening to a patient's perspective on their diagnosis and treatment will be carried on forward. And talking about run-of-the-mill breast cancer, there's a lot of ick to that. There's a lot of ick to that, but that also comes from desensitization, right? You're an oncology doctor. You see at least 15 to 20 patients, right? Depending on how busy your practice is, with at the various stages of, the breast cancer diagnosis continuum, whatever you want to call it, right? So over time, it becomes a normal, right? Just like waking up and, it's going to sound crazy, but just like waking up and, brushing your teeth and grabbing a cup of coffee and having a routine, it becomes a professional routine. That the devastation that maybe this doctor may have had earlier on in their practice, it lessens over time because, okay, I see this over and over. This treatment modality has worked over and over. And, when we're talking about the statistics, right? When we're talking about the analysis, we forget sometimes that we put that in front of the human being in front of us, right? We forget this thing we tout, this individualized plan of care. We forget that.
Right.
So in one aspect, I feel for her, but in another aspect, it couldn't have happened in a more perfect scenario to affect change, right? And with all the doctors and nurses and advanced practitioners listening to this, please let it not be that you get to a point where you experience something this devastating as a breast cancer diagnosis or any diagnosis of any kind that is devastating. When somebody's in front of you, we respect your years of experience. We respect your education. It is very important to bring the person in. What are you feeling? What are you thinking? What are your fears? What are your concerns? Because some of us present very stoic just to manage the news, right?
Yeah.
And doesn't mean the questions are not there. So make room for somebody to be able to reach out to you outside of an appointment to ask questions, even if it's not to you directly. Make sure there's that availability within the clinic that, at midnight when this person is scared or concerned, they can write something down or email it, somewhere so somebody can follow up. But with that experience, it's...
I will say my doctors and nurses were very responsive over the My Chart email.
Yeah.
And I do want to suggest
Right.
to you and to everyone that a breast cancer diagnosis is upsetting, is surprising and unsettling, but doesn't actually need to be devastating. Now, it was shocking and somewhat devastating when my sister was 29.
Yeah.
Because she was 29. The cancer itself was tiny, was taken out. She had to go through an awful chemo, but it worked, and she was strong and she could handle it, and so on and so forth. And so it was devastating because of her age and because of the things in her life, her wedding, whatever. But for most of us, it's shocking and upsetting. But we actually want to help people see it doesn't have to be devastating, right? It is something you're going to go through. It's something we're going to treat. And for the vast majority, it is something that you are going to go through and past. So we want to be present. And I think healthcare providers, if you are, as you listen, as you think about this, what we want to do is encourage partnership with our patient, right? And so partners ask, not only do you have any questions, because the knee jerk is, no, I got it.
Right.
But rather, can you tell me how you're thinking about the treatment? Or can you tell me how you're feeling about this plan?
Just open-ended questions.
And I'm using rather specific words. Like there are people who want to tell you what they're thinking. So you've just asked them to. Or there are people who are caught in the feelings. And we want to let them do their thing. And trying each of those phrases, one of them is probably going to hit.
Yeah. And it's okay if they don't have answers because, that, talking about shock, right?
Mhm.
At times that things happen where you're shocked and, you're not thinking, you're just blank or you're numb, right? So just having room for those questions, eventually when that numbness wears away, when my head clears, I may have a barrage of questions that I would like to ask. However, knowing that I can ask it is very important, like you said. Opening that door so somebody understands that there's room to be heard and also to communicate whatever that feeling may look like.
That's
It's
right.
very important. And those key words that you mentioned, what are you thinking and what are you feeling? Feels are not things that is very much celebrated in our society, but it's necessary. Let go of communicate those feelings. So whoever is there to support you can support you through this journey because the journey can be tough. It can be tough.
It
So,
is.
oh my goodness, Joel, I'm so happy for you. I keep thinking about this book. So you have been in our first time talking. You talked about having a community of people, having support system. What has the reaction from your support system been with the success of your book?
Yeah, they're really happy for me. And it's interesting because you wonder, will people think this was egotistical? Will people think this was arrogant? Will people think, I'm attention seeking? And I woke up the morning of the release feeling very nervous. Like, what will people think that I have done this? Like, who am I? I'm not a leading researcher in cancer, breast cancer, whatever. I'm simply somebody who's survived and frankly had a deal of luck. Was caught early. It responded well to the less toxic chemo. The surgery was a success and I didn't have complications. I joke, like, if you were making a movie about it, it'd be boring. So, right? And you want to be. You want a boring cancer experience. I know how to make it more colorful, but the facts are boring. And the response has been so warm, so loving. I told you last time we spoke that my cancer year was one of the happiest of my life because of how loved and supported and held I felt without pity, because I don't like pity. Yesterday, was a jolt of that. Right? And a bunch of people who said, I had no idea. And that's okay too. Right? Someone wrote today, I had no idea and I don't know how that's possible, but I had no idea. And that's okay. Right? I believe, I told a bunch of people. Some people told other people, some people didn't. There was one day in Idongesit, because I was using Caring Bridge. Yeah. And I didn't publicize the link, but people who had it could give it to other people. I remember there was one day I called my best friend, Jessica. I said, oh, I know what social group just talked about me. And she started to laugh. I was like, this whole group of people are very connected to each other and they've all shown up on the same day on the site. So I'm in someone's text stream or I came up at lunch. I don't know where it was, but I know which group. And she started to laugh. She's like, does it bother you? I was like, no, it's why I did a Caring Bridge. Yeah. So they can. And I appreciate the support, right? There's no judging, but there were people who didn't share it. Right. Also okay. But when you have to lift something heavy and going through any form of cancer treatment, even if it's going to be run of the mill and simple, it's still heavy because it is a potentially fatal diagnosis, even if yours isn't. It's out of the blue. You're a very healthy person otherwise. And the randomness of it is upsetting and shocking. Like, what else random could happen? So you need support to lift that up. So if I asked you to support me and it's just the two of us, that's heavy for both of us. But when I ask you And I ask other people if they would just take a little bit. Well, we can lift massive boulders
Right.
together, and none of us feel like it's terribly heavy. The leading reason people don't tell people about their cancer is because they don't want people to feel obligated. They don't want to be a burden to other people. Now, the second reason is they're afraid of being fired, and that's a whole other conversation. But I don't want to be a burden. And what I want everyone to understand, whether you are a healthcare provider talking with patients or a patient or a friend of a patient, asking for help is not obligating people to help.
Right.
It is offering them the opportunity to help you. And if they take it, fantastic. And that opportunity helps them feel better, helps them feel good. It feels so good that I could help that ER doctor reaffirm her confidence in her choices, answer her questions, help her think about what she needs to have with her for recovery. I'm really glad I could do that. I didn't feel burdened, obligated. I felt like I'd had an opportunity to give a gift.
Right.
And giving gifts always is good for the giver.
Right. So you mentioned something that some people are afraid to admit sometimes, which is writing a book is not easy, first and foremost. Writing a book is not easy. So, Joelle, you went through this experience. You knew you needed to tell your story. You started the process of, putting a book together, learning additional skills, bringing in people to help you, whatever you did. I know from experience it's not an overnight process. You saw the finished material, you saw the finished manuscript, and, the mock-ups and everything, and you knew the date you were publishing this book. But even with all of that, all the preparation and all the knowledge and all the experience you poured into it, you still felt and wondered what people would think.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I felt very vulnerable. I was anxious. And those are just feelings.
Yeah.
And the thoughts below those feelings were, what if people hate this? What if people think this is ridiculous? What if people think I'm wrong or bad or whatever? And you kind of I had to kind of look at those thoughts. And Sam Harris talks about what true meditation is. And I'm not a great practitioner, but the practice of taking a thought and saying, it's just a thought. Let me inspect the thought. Let me look at the thought. And what do I want to make of that thought? Can I just let that thought go?
Yeah.
Do I want to hold on to that thought for some reason? And I said, I'm going to express that thought so that it's out of my mind and into the world. I'm not going to express it to 2,000 people, but I'll express it to a few. And then I'm going to do the things I was going to do. Right? Courage isn't the absence of fear.
Oof.
It's moving forward in spite of the fear.
That's right.
And so the die was cast, right? And the response has been very kind, has been very supportive. And, that's how it starts. And will there be somebody somewhere who doesn't like my book? Probably.
Yeah.
Will there be somebody who says, well, your story, you want to give an optimistic lens to cancer, but I lost my father when he was 42. And all I can say is, I am so sorry. I don't have a cure for cancer. I wish there was. I wish there was 100% reliable early detection. I wish. I don't have that. And I tried not to make my book sound like, you must hear this all the time. People come in and say, I hear that this particular supplement or this food or this diet or this will, prevent cancer. And it's like, I wish, I wish we knew such a thing, but we don't. And I don't have guarantees. I simply can say there's a way to make going through this better. That doesn't guarantee the outcome you want, but science, faith, God, there's other things are about the outcome.
Right. Right. And, just to say this, not that you necessarily need it, but just so you did an incredible job. So
Thank you.
whether somebody likes it, that's their business. That's not your business. Whether somebody touts their education over your experience, that is their business. That is not your business. You wrote a book based on your experience. You wrote a book based on supporting others on that journey. You never laid claims to knowing everything that comes with the cancer treatment journey or cancer treatment experience. However, you shared what worked for you in hopes that it will work for somebody else. You did what you needed to do.
Thank you.
Whether somebody likes it or not, whether somebody's experience educationally, professionally, is bigger, or you're in no competition with anybody. You're in your own lane, right?
That is so true.
Yeah.
And your words, they warm my heart. In fact, you've just, coming on your podcast is one of my happiness tripwires because I knew, of course, I knew we were going to have a great conversation and you'd have this fabulous, beautiful smile and full of hearts. And right, like we have to give people moments of happiness. And the thing is, they say, you never know what's going on for another person, and you don't. So one of the things I wrote about this, but, I think it's important, is I wanted to partner with my healthcare team. And I knew they have to keep an emotional and professional distance because they have to protect themselves, like emotionally. So I come in to my follow up with my last drain from my surgery. And that drain had bothered me and whatever else. And I'm there with my wonderful nurse practitioner. And she's like, cool, we can take the drain out. I'm like, great, let's do that. Can we just rip it? Like, what can we do to get that thing out, right? Drains are really good because they keep you from getting sicker, but nobody likes them. Okay. So, I wasn't affectionate. I named my port. I did not name the drain, but she takes it out and I turned to her and, and she's looking at me and I looked at her and I said, dance with me.
Oh.
And she said, what? I said, I am so happy. Dance with me. And we danced around the little treatment room just for, 20 seconds. And I wasn't trying to make a point. I was feeling such relief and such joy. I felt like the penguin from Happy Feet. I just have to move my feet. And it seemed like sharing that with this person that had done her job. She removed the drain. But why shouldn't she join me in my celebration? And did I look foolish? Probably. Did I make her day? No idea. Did we have a really nice 10-second dance around the treatment room? We did. And, that's a burst of happiness. And maybe she'll take that into her next appointment, just feeling a little bit happier and a little bit better. Because in that moment, by doing her job and being present with me, she made me so happy. I had to share it. I had to dance.
These are stories that nurses appreciate because, yes, we're there to make sure we follow the treatment orders. We're making sure that the patient is stable. We're making sure that we are applying nursing knowledge, critical thinking skills, all of that extra clinical stuff. The main crux of what we do, because we spend the most time with people at their most vulnerable, is those seamlessly little things that happened months ago. You still remember it because it made a difference. It reminds me of something that happened in clinical with one of my students. It was medication. I started her medication administration and I went in with her. And the patient, she was very tired. She really did not want to deal with anybody. I think her daughter was there. Her daughter came in to see her. And, we kind of like encouraged her to take her morning medication. And she's like, I don't know what is going to encourage me to do this. And we told her, hey, we'll dance with you. And we did. And she smiled, got up, sat up, took her medication. And her daughter was laughing the entire time. She's like, that was worth it, right? We may never see this woman again. We may never see her family members again. However, that moment is something that will come up. Either, Mom, do you remember when? Or to whoever, right? So sharing that is very important. And also, to my nurses, I know we're burnt out. I understand. I get it. And we often don't deal with happy moments like that all the time. But it is very important that when things like this present itself, even if it's hold my hand, can you pray with me? Or grab a pillow, let's scream into the pillow together. Do it. Please do it. Because you don't know what need you're meeting for that person. And it's very rewarding. And it's a story this person will tell. So thank you for sharing that, Joelle. And I think it's great for people who are there every day for people to hear that they're actually appreciated. And that means a lot. So, my goodness, you are magical. You are so magical. You're telling me coming on this show is your tripwire. Like, I'm honored. Thank you. Thank you. Having you on is kind of like, just chit-chatting. We chit-chatted, for a while before we're like, wait, we're not recording. Let's jump in. Let's record. So what is the next thing for you, Joelle?
So there's a number of things on my checklist. So where the paperback version, this version is going to become available on Amazon. So people who want a copy can get it. I built a workbook. It's about a 45-page interactive workbook for the patient, the newly diagnosed, their family, so that if they want something they can write on, they want something to use and walk through. So that's available now and on my website, and that'll be available on Amazon at some point. Then I'm going to do a webinar with my friend Julie Bach on February 11th. Nice. Would love for if you come, I'll send you the invite. But this is about how do you balance transparency and privacy when you're a working person and you're facing cancer. And we're going to cover how do you respond when someone who works for you tells you that either they've been diagnosed or someone they love has been diagnosed, because you want to know, because they're going to need some flexibility. They're going to need some support. But that is a really scary conversation to bring up. Besides that, you're scared about having this diagnosis that can be fatal, even though yours might not be. Telling your boss, telling your teammates is hard. So we're going to talk about that. And we're going to talk about, okay, as a boss, how do you handle that? Yeah. And as a person, how do you introduce that conversation? How do you have that conversation? Because, half the people diagnosed with cancer are in the workforce. Yeah. And it does impact, even if you have a rather simple case and you're going to have a fairly straightforward treatment process, even the psychological impact of, I've been diagnosed with cancer. My sister, when she was 29, she said, you know what pisses me off besides the cancer? I'm like, well, that's enough. She was like, I'm a flipping statistic and I hate that. I said, okay. So you become a statistic. You always have to check it off on the forms that you've had cancer. You're one of them.
Right.
So your coworkers are ultimately going to need to know something. Mm-hmm. And that's hard. So we're going to do a webinar on that, and we may do a series that goes through various different experiences from the book, so that whether you are a nurse, a doctor, a patient, a family member, there's something you can learn and something you can do from having a conversation. Yeah. So those are the things that are next.
Those sound like great things, because I am very interested in, I learned something from you today, that, in this day and age, even with the prevalence of cancer diagnosis and the advancement that we've made in cancer treatment, that it is still a fear that most people have to have that conversation with their employers for fear of losing their jobs. That is, that's mind blowing.
Well, and you can be afraid of losing your job, which you should know you are a protected class. They can't just fire you. But if you lose your job, you may lose your health insurance, which is a double whammy, right? People are also afraid I won't be considered for new projects, new opportunities. I will be cancer tracked, right? I will be sidetracked. And by the way, the bosses do that sometimes because they don't want to impose. They don't want to make it harder. And so you want to be able to say, hey, I want to do this much. I want to be intellectually involved. Or you can be like my friend Jacqueline, who said, I'm a charge nurse overnight in labor and delivery. I need to go on disability. Like, I can't do my work. Okay. Like, you could be anywhere between those two things. But just like we were saying with the doctor talking to the patient, it's a conversation. Assumptions don't work. You have to be okay with asking, what do you need? How can we help? What do you want to do work-wise during this process? And everyone has to remember, in the vast majority of cases, but not all, it's a period of time. And that period of time will end. And then you're stronger than ever, if not physically, because you just did something amazing.
It's still mind-boggling. I'm learning from you every single time you come in and we have this conversation, because it gives me another avenue to really hone in on the advocacy journey that I'm on. Understanding that some people don't even have access to the support system or treatment that they should have, and more so people who maybe based on income only have a certain degree of coverage. And then on the flip side, learning that, coverage is actually being denied because of a diagnosis that really actually needs the coverage for treatment is another level of, what are we doing?
So we could have a whole session about, we've talked about how to advocate for your health with your healthcare providers. Yeah. You're going to also end up doing it with your health insurance carrier.
Yeah.
And, I ended up writing, it didn't make it into the book, but I have a blog post of, I can outlast your hold music. Like, I'm that stubborn that
I can't bother with Joelle. He's like, go ahead, play it. I'm here.
Good. I can do 12 other things. The phone's going to be on the hold music. Go ahead. Oh, phone tree? Got it. I'll wait.
Oh my goodness, I can outlast your hold music needs to go on a t-shirt. I think you should have I love it.
Exactly.
So have you looked into, or are you willing to explore, the plenty support groups, the plenty network that support people with the cancer diagnosis, especially breast cancer, right? So are you looking to do anything in that arena in addition to maybe having this, seminars, webinars, really discuss the crux of the matter, things that you've seen, experienced, and heard, through your journey?
I would love, I love to facilitate conversations, and I love to bring people on thought journeys where they can look at different frameworks, different lenses. So I would love to do workshops, to do seminars, and even to speak with professionals in the field, with patients, with advocacy groups, because together we're partners.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot we can learn from each other, and there's a lot to share. There's also opportunities for us all to grow. And so, we're not even close to eradicating cancer. Like, it's not in my lifetime.
Yeah.
And I hope that we get closer on early detection. early detection means we're going to be having this conversation with people.
Right.
And going from the not devastating, just flipping inconvenient. So let's just deal with flipping inconvenient and try to not have devastating. And so I'd love to, is the answer. I'd love to. Invite me, reach out to me. Let's do something together. Let's change the world.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Joelle, again, I'm very happy for you for your book. Please put it up again.
Yes, ma'am.
It's beautiful, people. Crushing the Cancer Curveball. Grab a copy, enjoy it. So, Joelle, bask in the success of this well-written book. It is well-deserving. You know, I know earlier in our conversation before we jumped on, I told you to pinch yourself. It's real. So keep doing that. When in doubt, pinch. You know.
But make sure you pinch somewhere you feel it. Like I pinch around here and there's nothing. People need to know that if you have a mastectomy,
It's true.
You're not going to have sensation for parts, and it's just a fact.
That is just truth in the most humorous way. It is true. You know, when you're cutting into nerve endings and stuff, sensations do go away. So she is not wrong. She's right. However, we have it here. So
pinch here.
Sensation. We still have sensation elsewhere. So, goodness.
I know where your head went. You come out of that gutter, lady.
Benjamin and now, Joelle, I can't. I love these conversations with you. Much deserved, well deserved. You did a great job with that book, and I'm going to grab myself a copy. And I've seen aspects of it, but I need to delve right in. And all of you, please grab a copy. It's a good read. From the reviews I've seen, from the excerpts I've seen, yes, I need to dive head first. Whatever project you're working on, please feel free to come on and tell us about it. We want to get involved in it. And if you're a provider, healthcare provider, nurse practitioner, best practicing nurses of all kinds, nurses, since we're talking about breast cancer, so this is going to be focused on oncology. If you have to reach out to Joelle to work with her, please do so. Grab a copy of this book. You can learn a thing or two about, putting in more empathy into your practice every day. It makes a difference. And
happiness tripwires. You can do happiness tripwires.
Yes.
Literally, it's a 5-second thing. And that isn't about putting a happy face on things. It can be just as simple as taking someone's hand and saying, how you doing today?
Yeah.
That's it.
And happiness tripwires are everywhere. Let it be organic. Don't make it mechanic. It loses its answer.
That should be a t-shirt. Organic, not mechanic.
We are making all kinds
We're
of
going to make a business of t-shirts.
That's going to merchandise business. But organic, not mechanic. I love it. So this was great. Thank you for coming on to celebrate your book. I was eagerly waiting this conversation, and I actually put off my physical therapy. I'm like, can we make it a little later? Have somebody coming. So
okay, well, go take care of yourself.
We're going to therapy later, my physical therapy. So this was a great outcome to your book release, and it couldn't have happened to a better human being. And we just met not too long ago, but you are such a ray of sunshine, Joelle. Just being authentically yourself, that shows through. And please don't ever let anybody have you doubt now for 1 second.
Thank you. All right. So we will talk again, I am sure, soon.
We will. And please just let everybody know where to get your book, your website, and how to reach you. One more time.
You bet. So get the book on Amazon. All you have to do is search Crushing the Cancer Curveball. At this point, if you do Crushing it's going to just show up. Yeah. So it is a #1 international bestseller, and there's a little mark on it. So that's cool. So Amazon for the book. You can find the workbook. You can find other resources at joellekaufman.com. Don't get excited. The only doubles are the L's. Everything else is a single, just like the name in the little purple spot right there. joellekaufman.com for the workbook. And I think those are the best ways to get in touch with me.
Beautiful. Yes, please do that. We'll also include that in the show notes so you don't have to worry about the spelling and everything else. We'll make sure you have the right links. And yes, everybody, please take care of yourself. Be somebody's happiness tripwire if you can. All right? Great.
Spread joy. Spread joy.
That part. Thank you, Joelle.
Take care.
All right, take care, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in to Unshelling Medicine Podcast. If you want to stay up to date with the latest episodes, make sure to hit that subscribe button on your favorite podcast platform. If you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to leave us a review. Follow us on social media at Altruistic Scribe on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. We share additional tips, updates, and health-related content that you won't want to miss. Have any questions or topics you'd like us to cover in future episodes? Reach out to us at altruisticscribeco.com. We're always eager to hear from our listeners and tackle the health topics that matter most to you. Until next time, stay healthy and take care.